Hey everybody, Aaron Rift here from NoDQ.com with another top 25 list. This time it's the top 25 tag teams in WWE history. Criteria includes look of the tag team, theme music, how did they work as a team, their championship reigns, and just their overall impact. Was this team memorable? I'm going to do all these teams in one video here, so it's not going to be spread out. I'm going to get right down to it. Starting at number 25, the Steiner Brothers. Now, if this was including all promotions, not just WWE, these guys would be towards the top. But since it's just WWE, they would be at the bottom of my top 25 list here. But for the short time that the Steiner Brothers were in WWE, they made a huge impact. They were the top babyface team around 1993, early 1994. They appeared at the very first Monday Night Raw, and then they would eventually go on to defeat Money Inc. to become tag team champions, and they were extremely popular, just as popular in WWE as they were in the NWA and WCW. So Steiner Brothers definitely a force to be reckoned with in WWE when they were around. Next up, we have the Natural Disasters. This was an interesting team. You had Earthquake and Typhoon, these two huge guys, and believe me, they stood out. And they didn't have a very long run. They were around from late 91 to early 93, but they had some very interesting feuds. They started off as a heel tag team managed by Jimmy Hart, and then they split from Jimmy and went off on their own and became baby faces. So you don't see a whole lot of tag teams that could pull off both roles, but these guys did it, and they would go on to beat Money Inc. and win the tag team titles, and just very memorable tag team. You never forget the Natural Disasters. Next we have the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkoff. In my opinion, one of the greatest heel tag teams of the 1980s. They won the tag titles at the very first WrestleMania, so that's something significant right there, and I always remember them coming out. Iron Sheik gets on the mic, Russia #1, Iran #1, USA, awesome tag team and very entertaining during that time period. Next up, we have Jacques and Pierre, the Quebecers, another great tag team in WWE, one of the great heel tag teams of the mid-1990s. One of the things I remember about them was their outfits. They had the matching Mountie uniforms, but of course, as they alluded to in their classic theme song, they were not the Mounties. And they had Johnny Polo as their manager. They had their Quebec province rules, which meant that the titles could change hands on a DQ. So that was their shady way of defeating the Steiner Brothers and becoming tag team champions. Great team. After that, we have Owen Hart and the British Bulldog. This was a great tag team because they always were on and off. They weren't always getting along. They won the tag team titles from the Smoking Guns, but there was the whole jealousy storyline. Owen Hart was jealous of the British Bulldog, and it just made for some very entertaining television. And these two had tremendous chemistry together, and they were awesome as a tag team. They were awesome when they were feuding. Love these guys. The APA. This tag team started off as the Acolytes. They were part of the Undertaker's Ministry of Darkness, and then they evolved into the APA. They had their own little backstage setup where they drank beer and smoked cigars, played poker, and sometimes they would get into bar fights. Very cutting-edge stuff for the time, and they were a key tag team during the Attitude Era. The Smoking Guns, 3-time WWE Tag Team Champions. One of the top tag teams in WWE during the mid-90s. Probably the top babyface tag team for sure. Billy Gunn, Bart Gunn. There were a lot of cowboy tag teams, but these guys really stood out, and they had the matching looks and outfits and everything, and they were just a great tag team. Up next, we have Money Incorporated, Ted DiBiase, Erwin R. Shyster, IRS, managed by the great Jimmy Hart. This was a tremendous tag team. They were one of the top heel tag teams in WWE throughout 1992 and 1993. They feuded with other great tag teams like Natural Disasters and Steiner Brothers, as I mentioned earlier. And just they got great heel heat. One of the most memorable segments with them was when they finally broke away from Jimmy Hart. They smashed the briefcase over the face of Brutus the Barber Beefcake. They were tremendous. The Nasty Boys, managed once again by the great Jimmy Hart. Nasty Boys were very in your face. They rubbed their armpits in your face, literally. They beat the Hart Foundation at WrestleMania 7, and they were another great heel tag team during that period. And eventually they would go on to turn face as well and feud with Money Inc. So Nasty Boys, they had a great run outside of WWE, but when they were in WWE, they were perhaps at their very best. The British Bulldogs, Davey Boy Smith and the Dynamite Kid. Some people would call them the greatest tag team of the 1980s. Definitely, they were towards the top of that list. They were just tremendous in-ring workers. You knew you were going to get a great match every time those two stepped in the ring. And they were both just very physically put together, and they worked really well together. They won the tag team titles at WrestleMania 2. Perhaps they could have been one of the greatest tag teams of all time, but unfortunately, Dynamite Kid started having health issues. His body was breaking down on him, and they kind of faded away as the 80s came to a close. But during the time that they were around and at their peak, there was nobody better. Next up, we have the world's greatest tag team, Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin. Like the British Bulldogs, these two were excellent in-ring workers. You knew when these two got into a match, you were going to see something really special. And they worked well with pretty much anybody they were in the ring with. They were two-time tag team champions, and from a technical standpoint, they were one of the greatest tag teams of all time. No doubt about it. Up next, we have the Brothers of Destruction, The Undertaker and Kane. As singles competitors, these guys were dominant, but as a tag team, they were virtually unstoppable. No doubt one of the most dominant tag teams in the history of WWE. And they would form a union, and then they would split off, and then they would reunite again, on and off over the years. And we even saw them as recently as the 1000th episode of Monday Night Raw. And perhaps we'll see them again at some point. But when they get together, all hell breaks loose. The Wild Samoans, Afa and Sika, managed by the late, great Captain Lou Albano, one of the greatest managers of all time, but that's another list for another time. The Wild Samoans, they had 3 reigns as tag team champions, one of the greatest tag teams during their era, the late 70s, early 80s. And very influential. I mean, they paved the way for future Samoan tag teams like the Head Shrinkers, and even today with the Usos. Just an all-around great tag team. Next on the list is Los Guerreros, Eddie Guerrero and Chavo Guerrero. One of the funniest tag teams in WWE history, and certainly one of the most entertaining. Their vignettes alone, I mean, those were extremely hilarious and very funny. And that's when the whole lie, cheat, and steal motto came into play. And they started off as heels, but they were just so entertaining. You know, they came out with the Lowrider and the music, and they just instantly became baby faces. I mean, there was no way that you could hate these guys. What do you get when you take the 2 biggest superstars of your era and you put them together? You get the mega powers, Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage. Those two had just endless amount of charisma when they were together as a team. Everybody remembers the handshake that they did, and they headlined SummerSlam, the very first SummerSlam. They were a team at the Survivor Series, and then eventually they broke off, and the mega powers exploded at WrestleMania 5. How many tag teams can say that they made the impact that those two made when they were a tag team, and then when they split up and had a match against each other? Not very many. Shawn Michaels and Triple H. DX. The two of them together, they were there at the beginning when DX first formed, and then when DX had its reunions over the years, it was Shawn Michaels and Triple H together as a duo. The two of them were just so entertaining. It was like Beavis and Butthead. They were like a comedy team, like Abbott and Costello. They were just Very funny, and when they got in the ring together, they kicked ass. DX, one of the all-time great tag teams, and they even did win one tag team championship towards the end of the run of DX back at TLC in 2009. So DX finally got the tag team titles, but even if they didn't win the tag team titles, they're one of the all-time great teams. Next up, we have the Rock and Sock Connection, The Rock and Mick Foley, perhaps the greatest odd couple tag team in WWE history. When these two were together, it was just pure magic. You had The Rock and Mick Foley at each other's throats. The Rock would not want to have anything to do with Mick Foley, and Mick Foley would just try to get The Rock's affection and love and respect. And he would have Mr. Socko dressed up like The Rock. Foley would have the This Is Your Life segment dedicated to The Rock, one of the most watched segments in Raw history. Like I said, when these two were together, you were guaranteed pure entertainment. Oh, you didn't know? Next up, New Age Outlaws, Road Dogg and Billy Gunn. They weren't the best in-ring workers. They weren't the flashiest tag team, but they were certainly one of the most entertaining. Whether they were with D-Generation X, doing all the funny skits like invading WCW, or off on their own being these menacing heels, like when they put Mick Foley and Cactus Jack into a dumpster and pushed them off the stage. The New Age Outlaws were Hellraisers, and they were an absolute perfect fit for the Attitude Era. Next up, we have the Dudley Boyz, Bubba Ray and Devon. 8-time tag team champions, a record in WWE. These guys had so many classic matches, TLC matches, table matches. When they came out, they raised hell. The crowd chanted, "We want tables," and the Dudley Boyz could entertain people in so many ways, whether it was with the 3D through a table or whether it was them getting on the mic and insulting the audience. They were just so great at everything they did, and you cannot have a top tag teams list without these guys. Next tag team on the list, as Gorilla Monsoon would say, were tag team specialists. I'm talking about the Rockers, Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty. These two broke new ground in WWE. They were high flyers, and in a world of 1980s WWE, when you just had these larger-than-life superhero characters that did a lot of power moves and didn't move very fast, you had this team, the Rockers, and they were the complete opposite. They were all over the place in the ring, doing just amazing moves, and they were very well coordinated together. They would do the double drop kicks, and they were just so much fun to watch. And the greatest tag team to never officially win the tag team titles. They did beat the Hart Foundation, but the match was not recognized as a title change, but they didn't need the titles to be one of the greatest teams of all time. All right, we're now down to the top 5 tag teams. Number 5, Edge and Christian, 7-time tag team champions. These two started off as part of the Brood with Gangrel, and they broke off on their own. They had their match with the Hardy Boys at No Mercy 1999, and that really established all those guys as future superstars. And Edge and Christian would go on to win TLC matches at SummerSlam, WrestleMania. They were extremely dominant as champions, and they could be very funny, very entertaining with the 5-second pose and dressing up like Elvis. They would do all sorts of crazy things, and they were great heels. They were great baby faces, just excellent tag team. Number 4, Axe and Smash, Demolition. Now, initially they were brought in to kind of be the WWE's version of Legion of Doom, but they ended up getting over. They were extremely over as a tag team, whether they were as heels managed by Mr. Fuji or on their own as baby faces. Axe and Smash were the real deal, and they were also the longest reigning tag team champions in WWE history, winning the titles at WrestleMania 4 and holding them for a little over a year. So Demolition dominated the tag team scene. They had the outfits. They were a badass tag team, and they are certainly deserving of being in the top 5. All right, number 3, the Hardy Boys, Matt and Jeff Hardy. These two guys broke new ground, just like the Rockers did 10 years earlier. The Hardy Boys came in. They weren't these large powerhouse type guys. They were just small guys, basically going from backyard wrestling to the major leagues. But these guys proved that they deserved their spot in WWE. They would go out there with Edge and Christian. They would take chances that no other tag teams would take. They would be jumping off ladders, going through tables. The Hardy Boys were extreme to the max. They were risk takers, and they earned the respect of each and every fan that came to see them, and they developed a very strong cult following. The Hardy Boys were just amazing to watch, and one of the greatest of all time, no doubt about it. My number 2 tag team is a team that some people would consider to be number 1 overall, but since this is strictly a WWE list, they're my number 2. I'm talking about the Legion of Doom. They were huge superstars during the 1980s in WCW, the NWA, but when they came to WWE, they continued to be dominant. They had the theme music. When that music hit, the crowd went into a frenzy. They had the spiked shoulder pads. They had the face paint. And they were just true badasses. I mean, Demolition was a great tag team, but nothing can compare it to Legion of Doom in terms of just pure brutality that these two brought to the ring. And when they came out, you just wanted to see them kick somebody's ass. And one of the most memorable teams of all time. I went out a few years ago for Halloween. I see people dressed up like LOD wearing the shoulder pads, and people still remember LOD to this very day. So that shows you how much of a big deal they were to people over the years, and the marketability, just all the attributes. LOD was as close to perfect as you could possibly ask for without being Kurt Hennig, of course. And finally, we're down to the number 1 tag team of all time. Some people might agree, some people might disagree, but my number 1 pick is the Hart Foundation. Bret Hart and Jim the Anvil Neidhart. These guys had everything. They had the longevity. They formed together in 1985. They had a 6-year run. For several years, they had Jimmy Hart as their manager. They were the most dominant heel tag team in WWE. And then they turned baby faces and became the most dominant good guy tag team in WWE. So not a lot of tag teams could pull off what these guys pulled off. They had all the attributes in the ring. You had Jim the Anvil Neidhart, the powerhouse. He did all the power moves. You had Bret Hart, the technician. He was the workhorse of the tag team. And when you put them together, it was pure magic. And they had the matching outfits, the pink and black. They had the jackets, the sunglasses. These guys were, you wanted to be like the Hart Foundation. There was just no other tag team, in my opinion, that could match up to these two. So in my opinion, they're number 1. All right, that'll wrap it up for my top 25 list. I'm sure I'll get some criticism. I'll get some compliments. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment. Who would be your number 1 tag team? Let me know. And with that being said, thanks for watching, and stay tuned to NoDQ.com for the very latest in WWE and TNA wrestling news.